What is your biggest medical fear? Story 1. I was having regular treatments that needed anesthesia and muscle relaxant, in that order. One of the times, the muscle relaxant kicked in before the anesthesia, and I was unable to breathe and also tell them I couldn't breathe. Am terrified that could happen again. Story 2. The one I'm living in. Being epileptic is worse than you think. This illness has taken my independence, my freedom, my stability, just because I can drop at any time. No warnings, no way to avoid it. I can be asleep and die from a seizure. I take 11 pills a day just to control it. But once or twice a month, I still get a seizure. This is not living, this is the bare minimum. Story 3. That I'll get cancer. I smoked cigarettes for 45 years before I quit in 2021. Cancer runs in my family. My mother had a mastectomy for breast cancer, and my father died from stomach cancer. His father died from cancer too, and his brother had prostate cancer. I'm next in line. I'm really praying that it skips a generation. Story 4. I've had uterine cancer in the past, which makes a hysterectomy a matter of when, not if. I had some minor surgery for this issue in the past and had a bad reaction to it, so I'm not really looking forward to what recovery of the removal of an entire organ will be like. Answer. If you're able to have a vaginal hysterectomy, recovery is much easier. I had a precancerous tumor discovered in my uterus, and because of my family history, my gyno said it had to go immediately. He also insisted that I had to have an abdominal hysterectomy so he could see everything better, have the ability to see if there were other cancerous tumors. I was told by another gyno later that isn't necessarily true. Who knows, but yes, recovering from an abdominal surgery sucks. However, once healed and then on bioidentical hormones, I felt like a brand new and improved woman. Oh, and sane. I never realized how badly the constant cysts on my ovaries was affecting my hormones and in turn my mental health. Story 5. I refuse to come to terms with the fact that my life will change. But honestly, the exhaustion and brain fog is so bad, some days I can barely understand how to cook a meal, or do a basic chore, or remember the routines at my job, much less have the energy to do such things. I'm only 28, and I'm so scared of how life will be for me when I get older. Story 6. Passing. But luckily, when I went to get a medical green stuff card about 15 years ago in Cali, the doctor refused to provide it. He said you have high blood pressure and need to get it checked. And then he said he would fill it. I did, and he did. And now pot is legal and my HBP is under control. Pot saved my life. Story 7. Every time something is wrong, the doctors just say it's your autoimmune problems. I am afraid they will miss cancer or something bad because they just trivialize everything wrong as just my autoimmune problems. Story 8. Getting my father's half of the genes when it comes to medical history. My mother and her family all grow to 90 and get simple medical problems. And my father and his brother and his mother all had retinal detachments, cataracts, basal cell carcinomas, and various stage 3 cancers before the age of 60. I'm 43, so I guess we'll know in 10-15 years or so. Story 9. Becoming conscious during surgery. There's no way for you to communicate that you're not unconscious. This happens in 1 in 500 cases where general anesthetic is used, which is way too frequently for my comfort. To be fair, local anesthetic is also used and often the patient doesn't experience pain. But I've read there are still sounds and smells that you do not want to experience. People understandably report PTSD when this happens. Story 10. Getting something like cancer or dementia. Not something quick that my family could recover financially from. Something long and slow that would drain us dry over years, lose the cars, the house, everything, and then die in agony to leave my family in abject poverty. Story 11. TBI or Alzheimer's. Watched my mom go through dementia caused by a TBI. She lived 16 years as a shell of herself, and it was gut-wrenching and so hard. I don't want my kids to have to deal with it like I did. Story 12. I fear I'm going to die of something heart-related. I'm only 20, but my heart isn't in the best health. Just had to get an echo done, and frequently have symptoms of a heart attack. My heart rate is very inconsistent and will drop down really low to really high. I've been admitted to the emergency room nearly 5 times this year, and the biggest fluctuations I've recorded is 27,202 BPM. I really want to go out and enjoy summer, but I can't, because I don't know if I'll be okay or not. I really wanted to hike, but I don't know if it'll cause something worse. I just wish I could be normal again. Story 13. I'm 3 days out from spine surgery. It took years, it seemed forever. The eye ended up with spinal stenosis of the lower spine, and if the cervical spine. Last weekend, I lost control of my bladder. I told myself, this is not a good sign. So I was off to the ER, took myself to the ER. Emergency surgery. I don't want to ever have to say goodbye to my children. Story 14. One time, while working in the ICU, I cared for a woman with locked-in syndrome, definition below. Because she couldn't blink, we had to put special glasses on her to protect her eyes. Despite this, her left eye became dry and infected, and I had to assist as a surgeon sewed her eyelids shut. Her sisters refused to discuss hospice or palliative care, keeping her alive in this condition for over 2 years. She cycled between nursing homes and the ER, returning to the ICU every month or so with bed sores and pneumonia. It was heartbreaking. Locked-in syndrome, LIS, is a rare neurological disorder that results in complete paralysis of voluntary muscles, except for those controlling vertical eye movements and blinking. People with LIS are fully conscious and cognitively intact, but cannot speak or move. They typically communicate through eye movements or assistive technologies. LIS is usually caused by damage to the brainstem, particularly the pons, often due to a stroke, traumatic brain injury, or certain diseases. There are different forms of LIS, including classical, incomplete, and total immobility, which vary in the degree of movement retained. Story 15. Any prion or rabies. Rabies can at least be treated if discovered before symptoms occur. But prions are just an inevitable degradation of your body that you can't stop if you acquire one, or even worse, have the genetic factor for them. Story 16. IDK if this counts or not, but it's, what if I have some kind of mental condition that internally I'm completely unaware of, but had my whole life? In my own mind, I'm fully functional and think I'm living a normal life. But in reality, I'm a babbling idiot and I'll never even know. Story 17. Oof, after having some messed up experience with an eye surgeon, I've allowed myself to make the choice to not have more eye surgeries. If I ever do end up needing another one again, I'd rather go blind. I can deal and cope with losing my sight, but I cannot cope with the idea of having someone cut or my eye again while I'm awake. Or the pain of recovery. Not worth it. Honestly, the inner peace that came out of making that decision has been so healing. Story 18. Parkinson's. Went through this with my father 17 years ago. Then my partner of 26 years was diagnosed with this disease in 2017, and I soon became a full-time caregiver until his passing in January 2024. Story 19. Being a financial burden for the people who have to care for me, cancer, Alzheimer's, dementia, Anything where they have to pay to watch me rot in my own skin. Other than that, probably that catfish that swims up your pee hole. Story 20. I once heard this story about a woman who had an unbearable itch in her scalp, caused by shingles, so bad that she scratched through to her brain. If I remember correctly, it was some kind of nerve damage, so not easy to fix at all. And as someone who suffers from severe eczema, who has actually contemplated tragic end due to the itching, am way better now, don't worry. The thought of a borderline incurable itch is terrifying. I don't believe I can get shingles since I had the chickenpox vaccine as a baby, but I'm going to be paranoid about it for the rest of my life. Also, I asked my sister this question, and her worst fear is waking up during surgery. Story 21. I work in the ED, so I've seen some things. For me, 1. Gangrene, 2. STDs. Thankfully, I have enough sense to not hook up and have intimacy with everyone, but you can still get them anyway. 3. Endocarditis. 4. Pulmonary embolism. 5. Gingivitis. Story 22. Realistically, falling. I'm not elderly and still have a spring in my step, but as I get older, I am terrified of falling and severely injuring myself. I don't have any family that could help out other than my kids, and my friends live pretty far away. I'd have to get someone to help me with basic care if the injuries were that bad. I have disability insurance, but that only goes so far. I'm terrified to lose my job and not be able to care for my kids and cats. Story 23. Having to go to the hospital. Like hell, I can afford to spend everything I have saved and more just for someone to tell me what I already know is wrong with me. I know what's wrong with me, and I just pray that it doesn't become more of a problem than it already is. Story 24. Oh, this is my time. I have this obsessive-compulsive thought loop that I am going to have a brain aneurysm at any moment. Literally. Maybe right now. And drop dead face first with no chance of survival. This has been an ongoing fear for probably like 10 or more years now. I don't have any family history or anything like that. I just feel like an artery in my brain is gonna blow at any moment. Story 25. I've had necrotizing fasciitis in my knee and septic shock. Never want to go through that again. Never want to be in a coma again or intubated again. Ugh, it's been 7 years and I have the worst PTSD imaginable. Story 26. Amniotic fluid embolism. My totally healthy friend had one after giving birth and was on ECMO and intubated in the hospital for weeks. Just a freak thing that isn't well understood and impossible to anticipate. And am 18 weeks pregnant with my third and can't stop thinking about it. Story 27. Dying how my mother did. They were throwing diagnosis after diagnosis out there. We still don't know what happened. Possible CJD. Almost like ALS. Also, she died the same age as her mother. 65 I'm only 40 and feel like I have 25 years left. Story 28. I didn't know it until I got it. I have 4 major medical issues that run my life. I have borderline personality disorder, ADHD, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and severe asthma. I wouldn't wish this combo on anyone. I'm 27, and it feels like my life is already over. The BPD and ADHD make it almost impossible to have relationships or hold jobs. Ehlers-Danlos syndrome is a genetic disorder where your body doesn't process collagen. That basically means you have a bunch of random symptoms and it causes a bunch of other diseases. POTS, Raynaud's, mast cell, lack of hair growth, gut hormones problems, hyper. Mobility. Because of it, I've had an ovarian torsion, where one of your ovaries slipped over on itself and loses blood flow and dies inside you. I break bones very easily, live with chronic pain and fatigue. It honestly feels like your bones are sliding apart slowly, and like your limbs are always on the verge of falling asleep. And with all of this, I look normal. People don't think I'm sick because I don't look sick, so they never take me seriously. The amount of medical gaslighting has just broken me. I cry when I go to the general practitioner for a checkup just from PTSD. I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy. Story 29. As of now, it's my neck. 3 days ago, I convinced myself I have a swollen lymph node, so I poked and prodded and squeezed so much it kinda made my muscles puffy. Now I'm convinced I have thyroid cancer. In a few days, I'll find another medical fear to be all-consuming. Luckily for people around me, I keep it to myself, but I've been convinced I'm dying for like 3 years now with absolutely no evidence to support my thought. Story 30. Any forgetting disease or mental illness, but really having to do any intense surgery with no anesthesia, I saw a video of a woman sharing her story of how it was her culture's tradition to cut off younger girls' clitoris and labia. She was 3 when it happened. Story 31. Getting anything like kidney stones or severe bladder conditions or getting diagnosed with diabetes, I have frequent urination, and it's irritating because I want to go regularly. I just want to be a normal person and not have to go all the time. Story 32. I was a hospice nurse for years, and the big 2 for me and a close third are ALS, a very rough illness and way to go. Pancreatic cancer will take you down very quickly, and very few symptoms, unfortunately. I had people out mowing their grass and doing well and gone a couple of weeks later, and of course, dementia, Alzheimer's. We used to tell families it was like a very long and heartbreaking goodbye. I also learned from those years a couple of things. We really don't know what is ahead of us, and we really don't have control over much of anything. We think we do, but that's an illusion. It keeps us sane, but in the big picture, things can turn on a dime. Having said that, and having just finished a cancer battle myself for the 3rd time, I tell everyone, seize the day. Story 33. As a type 1 diabetic, losing access to insulin. I've been on insulin pens for the past decade, but I'm finally considering switching to a pump. My insurance keeps changing what insulin pens are covered, and I'm terrified they're going to tell me, "Oh, you don't actually need them." I've been in the hospital twice for diabetic ketoacidosis, one of which was caused by not having any insulin pens on hand. I absolutely need them. Story 34. As someone who watches Grey's Anatomy and also watches movies like Final Destination and Saw for fun, it's hard for me to fear any being that's passing related. Diseases and disorders are uncontrollable and happen to everyone every day. What my fear is the doctors or nurses making a mistake so grave that it takes my life. My great-uncle died this way. He had cancer and was getting treatments. He had a lot of tubes plugged into him, and the nurse pushed air into the wrong tube, and he died shortly after that. Story 35. My wife is pregnant. I'm white, she's black. Context is important. I have learned quite a bit about the inequities in healthcare, especially with black women. I am afraid that the doctors or nurses would not listen to her if she is telling them what's going on. The black maternal passing rate is conspicuously high. I'm afraid that I'll lose both my wife and our baby. Story 36. ALS. I'm a caregiver. I've taken care of many people to the end of their life who had ALS. It's always terrible. The one specific client I had, who is a military veteran, ended up with cancer on top of it that he couldn't feel anymore, and it ate a hole into his body so deep I had to pack a pillow's worth of gauze into it every day. Story 37. My mother battled Parkinson's for 20 years. It's a horrifying disease. Her final 5 years were indescribable. I've been tested for the most common genes associated with it and am negative, but the possibility is still very much there and terrifying. Story 38. Not being believed about pain or certain symptoms and ending up with terminal cancer or some other horrible diagnosis that could have been avoided if only someone had listened. I die kicking and screaming. Story 39. Recurrence of breast cancer. They took one breast and some lymph nodes. I have pills to take for 5 years because I couldn't get chemo. If I still don't have cancer after the 5 years, then it probably won't come back. Right now, I'm told I have a 7-10 chance of developing metastatic breast cancer, which is incurable. But if I last another 18 months, the numbers go down significantly, and I can stop taking the horrible hormone blocker. Yay. Story 40. Brain-eating parasites or something of that nature. There was a show I think called Monsters inside me, and it had the worst, most terrifying things ever. Scarred me for life. Edit. True medical show, I think. Story 41. My biggest fear is dementia or a stroke. Grandmother had dementia. My mother had a stroke in 2020. Her right side is paralyzed, still partially, and she can no longer talk. She wants to tell me so much, but she just can't anymore. I visit her daily, and she's still home with Dad and all the care I could find because I work full-time. The doctor said it's better to take her to a care home. Today I went to her. She didn't hear me come in, and I saw her crying softly. My heart breaks every time I see her. Story 42. Having something serious and not being diagnosed until it's too late. I've heard too many stories of doctors misdiagnosing serious illnesses as weight-related or anxiety, and it turns out to be stage 4 cancer. Story 43. Having a heart problem where they have no time to prepare you and have to just cut you open right then and there. And I have one side of my family that's riddled with every heart problem you can imagine, car accident. Story 44. I told my fiancé that if I ever get diagnosed with either of them, then I'm taking a dignified exit on my own terms. He was distraught hearing this, but I personally don't want to live through that, especially the end parts. Story 45. After 16 years as a paramedic and spending a ton of time in nursing homes, I'd choose tragic end over the suffering that comes with mid-to-end stage dementia. Walk the halls of any nursing home, you'll hear people yelling for help. They're scared and confused, surrounded by low-paid strangers who don't really give a fudge. Not hating on all SNF, RNCNAs, you're all overworked with absolutely insane ratios. But some of you I'd like to meet in a dark parking lot for the straight-up human rights violations I've witnessed. Story 46. This runs in my family, and my mother was terrified of it happening to her after witnessing what it did to her mother and grandmother. When my mother learned a year ago that she had stage 4 pancreatic cancer, she told me that the only good news from it was that she'd die before she could develop dementia. Story 47. I did end-of-life care for each of my parents with dementia. My oldest bro has signs, and my sister is at the point where she can't really deny it anymore. I have the late onset gene. My dad did too. I'm 62 and, quite frankly, terrified. Mom knew she had memory problems from her early 50s on and did everything recommended. Story 48. I work with people with Alzheimer and dementia every day. It's pretty much the biggest fear of every one of my coworkers, that and head injuries. I hurt my back and couldn't work for a week, and honestly, that was far too much time for me to reply on others. So little compared to anyone with Alzheimer's dementia. Been spat at many times in my job, and honestly, after just this, I kinda get it. Story 49. I knew someone who had Alzheimer's. The day his GPS tracker was supposed to arrive in the mail 1.5 years ago, he went for a walk with his dog and never came back. The dog returned a few days later, but despite a huge search and rescue effort with hundreds of volunteers and SAR teams combing through the woods, he was never found. He was seen on the road a few miles down the road before he was reported missing, but that was it. The week before, he did the same thing and was found in someone's shed near the road several miles down the road. He told them he lived in a city that was an hour's drive away, even though he had absolutely no connections and never lived there. And they were kind enough to drive him there. He even gave them directions and told them where to go. But then his mind faded when they got there, though, and he acted confused, and that when they learned he was missing, and promptly returned him. Alzheimer's is a terrible thing. I'm sorry for your mother. Story 50. 100. My kids tell me I should slow down, get someone to do my yard work, etc. I tell them I'd rather they find me at the bottom of the mountain by following the buzzards circling my corpse than have me live another 10 years in a diaper in a nursing home. Story 51. Yup, my family knows if I get it. Move me to Oregon. I've had my father, 3 grandparents, 2 uncles, 1 aunt, 2 great-aunts die from complications due to Alzheimer's dementia. Fudge that. I'm not going out like that. Story 52. My dad passed away last year because of it. Last 5 years were a nightmare full of emotional pain. From time to time there was some laughter, but mostly pain. It's a horrible disease for all, not just stint. Story 53. My mother has entered herself into a medical study to treat it. She just passed the final physical and the infusions will start soon. I'm sure there have been many other studies with varying results, but she's happy knowing she's trying something after seeing what her mother and grandmother went through. And I'm so proud of her for sticking with everything that has led to this point. Maybe there's hope. Story 54. My answer was kind of the opposite. Someone I followed on Twitter a couple years ago tweeted that he went to the doctor and was told about low blood cell count or something, and his doctor wanted him to come back for more tests. He said it was weird because he felt fine. That was his last tweet. Ever since then, I've had a fear of not knowing that something was wrong, because I feel fine and I don't see it coming. Story 55. Oh God, this would be horrible. I didn't know this was a thing and watched House, and there was a guy who had it. I looked it up to see if it was real or a made-up thing for TV drama. I couldn't believe it. It's real. Story 56. I've had thoughts about this too. Fainting, stroke, heart attack, especially when my partner works away. Both of my kids have autism. We have the house locked up so they can't elope, and we are pretty isolated day to day, so if anything did happen, it could be days. I tried to teach my son how to call 999, but he doesn't have a great understanding of things. Story 57. I'm a medical writer, and when I first started, I had every single disease that is known to man. I would start to research something for a journal article and suddenly think that I had all the symptoms. One time during my first year, I went to the chief of medicine at the hospital where I was then employed and asked him if he thought I had some disease I imagined. He looked at me and said, "Are you really sure this is something you want to be doing for the next 40 years? Story 58. I went through such a huge fear of this, I actually stopped eating when I was alone. I would only eat when my husband was home. When he had to go back into the office for 8 hours, this was obviously not sufficient for myself, so I had to get over it. Small bites. Chew, chew, chew. Chew some more. Chew one more time, swallow.